Oh, Jen, you're not wearing makeup again. Why is that? It is called laziness, my children. A pure fucking laziness. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we are here to talk a little bit about the books that I read in the month of March. So this past month I read 9 books, most of which were for 2 different readathons, and I'll kind of mention those as I go over the books. Honestly, it was fun to read stuff for readathons this year, but I didn't really have a lot of time to devote to checking out what everybody else was reading or how they were doing or what was going on, so that sucked a little bit because I just didn't have the time to devote to try to like connect with people and look at what else was going on because life. But it was still fun to be reading in these readathons. So let's just go into the first thing that I read. I read for Dunder MifflinAthon and also Middle Grade March. The first book I read in March was for Dunder MifflinAthon. It was for, I was trying to complete the sales department, and I read first off the Stanley prompt, which is to read a book with a love triangle in it. So I read Nicola and the Viscount by Meg Cabot. This was actually a reread, as you can tell. I have read this book a lot. You probably heard me mention it in a couple of videos now. This is a historical fiction for young adults. It is about Nicola, or Nikki, as her friends call her. She is an orphan in about 1810. Hold up. Yes, 1810, I was correct. So Regency era, pretty much. She's 16, she's just finished up her finishing school. Finished at finishing school, essentially. And she has been invited to live with one of her school friends. For a while, she's kind of entering society and trying to stay in with everybody else, and this school friend happens to be the younger sister of someone who Nicola is just absolutely obsessed with. He's, you know, a Viscount. He's hot by some standards of then, I guess. And she has a huge crush on him. So right now her life would be pretty great because she's pretty content, if it were not for the fact that her relatives, those who are living, kind of really suck, and also the older brother of her best friend is constantly teasing her all of the time. So what's a young lady in society to do? I really liked revisiting it. The humor in it is pretty great. There's some very sweet moments in here. It also has some good discussions on being kind to people, especially those in circumstances that are different than your own, and especially kind to orphans. And it also has some really good content on marrying for love, not just to improve your status or title or anything like that, which is something that was rampant at the time. I loved the ending couple. Like, they're just, I'm obsessed with them. I was definitely still in the mood for Bridgerton when I picked this up, so I was glad this kind of scratched that itch slightly, even though of course it's for young adults, so there's not like rampant sex or anything in it, but it's still really enjoyable. I would consider this book and also Meg Cabot's other historical fiction, Victoria and the Rogue, I would consider them both to be kind of Bridgerton light, I suppose, are for people who want the cuteness and the romance, but not necessarily lots of torrid sex. So my favorite characters were Nikki, of course, and also one of the other characters in here, Nat, because I love a smart guy who is sarcastic. Ultimately, this was really adorable, and I gave it 5 stars. And next up, I also read for Dunder Mifflin MifflinAThon prompt, and it was also by Meg Cabot, and that was Boy Meets Girl. This was for the gym prompt, which is to read a book that starts with B. Kate and her best friend work in the human resources department of the New York Journal. Their boss is the TOD, tyrannical office despot, and she makes their life a living hell sometimes. But Kate's also having difficulties because she broke up with her high school sweetheart boyfriend. She's sleeping on her best friend's couch right now. She can't find a studio apartment anywhere, and just recently the TOD has told her that she has to fire the sweetest woman who works at the Journal and also happens to be the most popular baker at the Journal as well. If that isn't bad enough, she also finds out that this terminated employee is suing her and the Journal for a wrongful termination, and her lawyer happens to be this really hot dude. So, shenanigans ensue. I enjoyed this reread. I really like mixed media stories that are told with mixed media. I find it fascinating. This is told in like notes and emails and instant messaging and journal entries, voicemail transcripts. I love how this is done, but I will say also that how this is done is one of the issues that I had with this book. So some of the issues in here ultimately did not really make a lot of sense how they were ended. Basically, a couple of the times emails would end halfway through a sentence, and then the next email would be another character responding to that and going, "What happened? What's going on? Why did you stop saying stuff?" And it's like, what? How would they know that you entered your email? Because, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this was written in, like, the early aughts or whatever, so I think I can, I'm not too much of a dinosaur to say that how email worked then is, let's see, 2004. How email worked then is pretty much how it works now. Why would you send off an unfinished email? So how would that other person know that you stopped writing unless you sent off that unfinished email? Why would you do that? You normally, if you get interrupted in an email, you would just stop writing. I could understand if it was like an IM conversation or something like that. If you had managed to, like, you were just going really fast and you started writing something and you pressed enter and then you were about to write something else and then got interrupted and there's nothing. Like, I can understand if that would be something that, you know, would be concerning for somebody else who didn't get to hear the rest of whatever you were saying. But with an email, it's a little different. So that I guess I hadn't really considered any of the other times that I read it, but now thinking about it now, especially as someone who has to write a shit ton of emails every week, it really stood out to me and was really kind of jarring and unbelievable in here. Something else I will say, while I did really overall enjoy the story, enjoy the humor, it's whacked out, the characters are quirky with that particular shenanigan weirdness that Meg Cabot is really good at. There were a couple of things said within here regarding sexual orientation and gender roles that definitely did show the age of this book. It definitely showed that this was written in 2004 and not, say, 2014 even, or this year. It did show the age of it a bit. I mean, not in like the full way that for example, movies from the early aughts show their age, like American Pie and shit like that. It's not quite on that level of inappropriate and bad, but it's just a little bit like, I don't know. But otherwise, it was a pretty enjoyable reread. I did like getting back into these characters and everything. And it also reminded me that there's another book that's technically related to this that I never read. So that was cool. Anyway, yeah, favorite character? Probably Kate's best friend, Jen, because her amount of loyal rage, that's me, and I can get down with that. Anyway, I gave this 4 stars. So the next book I read was actually for middle grade March, and it was for the prompt to read a book that was published in the decade in which you were born. For this, I read Ramona Quimby, age 8. It is by Beverly Cleary. It's all about, of course, Ramona Quimby. She has recently switched schools and is starting the 3rd grade. She has a lot of responsibility now as a 3rd grader. She's technically a big kid now, per her parents, and she has a lot of responsibilities. One of the responsibilities is doing good in school, of course, and another responsibility is to get along real good with this 4-year-old cretin who is at the house in which she is watched after school. Because if she doesn't get along with this terrible bratty child, the terrible bratty child's grandmother will no longer agree to watch her, and then that's going to disrupt her family dynamics a little bit, as her mother is working and her father is also working but is also taking college courses to become a professor. And not only is she dealing with all of this, but she also has a really annoying classmate, and she thinks her teacher doesn't like her. Shit is rough for an 8-year-old. So before I did this reread, I can tell you the last time I read this, it definitely wasn't when I was 8. I definitely read this when I was older than 8, but I have not cracked this open since, like, elementary school. So it was really nice revisiting it. As you can tell, I have loved this to death as well. Even though it's been, like, so long since I've read this book, I slipped really easily right back in here. But it was really interesting to look at this from an adult perspective instead of a child's perspective, because as a child I just remembered really liking Ramona, really hating Willa Jean, who was the annoying 4-year-old, and just really connecting with the unfairness of being 8 and having everyone who's older than you kind of have the ability to boss you around, tell you what to do and what to wear and where to go, and why aren't you acting more like a grown-up, or a, you know, that kind of thing. Like, I really connected on that level with it. But looking at it as an adult, I can't say I fully could get down on that level anymore, of course, so many years later. But what I noticed was how many, like, serious things are talked about in such a thin little book that is written for children. For example, this doesn't just talk about the normal kid issues, like having someone at school who is either bullying you or being extremely annoying, or thinking that your teacher doesn't like you and you don't really much like your teacher either, or not really liking some of your peers or younger kids and stuff like that. It's not just like that, or being like annoyed with your parents for not always being there because they're working, or like just telling you what to do, like those normal little kid things. It also talks a lot about other stuff like money troubles. Before the events in this book, and it is mentioned in here, Ramona's father had lost his job several months before, and he had been unemployed for some time before he was able to find a job as a cashier clerk at the local grocery store. Of course, this leaves him very frustrated because, as anyone who has worked retail, you deal with a lot of shitheads all of the time. So he would come home absolutely exhausted from his long shifts, and also really upset with the way that people would treat him. And because of this, and also their money troubles, he and Ramona's mother would fight a lot. So it really talks about worrying about them, fighting, and also worrying about money troubles. Like, as an 8-year-old, she is extremely aware of her responsibility in the family on getting along at the house she goes to after school, to make it possible for her mom to work a full-time job and for her dad to be able to go part-time at the grocery store so he can also go to school, so they can better their family situation. At one point in the book, she gets ill and feels like she is a terrible, like, nuisance to everyone. Not only the teacher that she is sure doesn't like her, but everyone at the school, and especially her parents, who she's worried they're going to lose their jobs because now somebody has to take care of her because she's sick. That's a lot to be put on the shoulders of a child. And I think that, well, I wouldn't say this book would particularly be helpful in any way, and just being like, yeah, but it's all sunshines and rainbows at the end of the day. I think it is something that would be very helpful for kids who do feel that responsibility, or who do have kind of troubles going on, to connect with them and be like, there is somebody else that deals with this. This is something that other kids deal with. Here, I will say that parts of this book are kind of dated. Like, for example, certain things about, like, the telephone and the TV and whatnot is, like, you can clearly tell this is an older book. It's definitely not, like, a book that takes place in now. And there's also a couple of commercials that are mentioned in here that definitely date it. For example, one of them is pretty famous, but I'm sure that all people who are, like, kids now, or even in their early 20s, probably have no fucking idea what it is. I honestly was not alive when this was on the television regularly, or at least not to my knowledge. I just know of the commercial because it was parodied in something, so I know of it. It's stuff like that that definitely ages it a little bit, but the message behind it and the story and the characters are just timeless. I really liked the characters. Ramona, favorite character. Willa Jean, terrible brat who, in all honesty, I'm not a fan of hitting children, but if anyone needed to get spanked, it would be that fucking cretin. I'm just saying. My opinion on that kid has not changed since 1997. But overall, I just really appreciated this, and I feel like I appreciated this story much more than I did as a child who did not even remotely have those kinds of worries as a child. So, I feel like I appreciated it a lot more as an adult, I suppose. I ended up giving this 5 stars. Next up, I read something that was not for any readathons. It was just something that I have been reading off and on for a couple of months now, and I just finished it, and that is Spellcrafts by Scott Cunningham and David Harrington. I enjoyed this as much as I have Scott Cunningham's other books. It's very informative. Again, some things date it, but I mean, this is from, like, the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, look at her. Like, she looks like very 80s. So it was really interesting, though. There's some things in here that I find really fascinating that I'm probably going to do, and it already helped me make my own candles. See? I just reused an old candle jar, and I made my own candles. Get herbs and stuff in them. They smell fucking great. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I give it 5 stars. Next up, I read At Bertrams Hotel by Agatha Christie. This book was also for Dunder MifflinAthon, and this was for the Phyllis prompt, read a cozy book. This is a Miss Marple mystery, which I was very excited about, because as much as I love me some Poirot, and I do because he's my favorite, I do really enjoy Miss Marple. She is a character, and I love hearing her compare certain situations to current mysterious things that are going on, or have people remind her of other people, because honestly, that's how my brain makes connections too, and I don't know, I enjoy that. This is all about Miss Marple's stay at the Bertrams Hotel in London. She has been offered by her family to go on a holiday of sorts, and she decides she wants to go back to Bertram's, which is a hotel that she stayed at in London when she was a young girl. Things at Bertram's seem almost the same, and that is nice but also unsettling to her, because how could things possibly stay the same at this hotel? It has been literally probably like 40 or 50 years since she was last there. Decor, impeccable service, and there is also unsettling things underneath everything at the hotel. Something is not quite right, and Miss Marple knows it. Overall, I really enjoyed this. This book is not necessarily like most of her others, which are all like murder, 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 murder. This has a heist subplot, which I fucking appreciate, because I love me a good heist. Like The Italian Job, love it. Love a good heist. This is great. The heist bits are described in here. There's like some criminal activity happening. There are some very interesting like characters in here that are just impeccable, but also there's something wrong. Like I love that. I love the detective who is assigned to this. He is super smart, and he's like really good at ferreting out information. Miss Marple, of course, is delightful as per usual. I love the way that she does exactly what people expect her to do. Like, she behaves very much like a bumbling old lady, dropping things, forgetting things, going back, and she does it so she can like eavesdrop, or she can observe people or figure out things. She just plays on exactly what she thinks society sees her as and just plays it up so she can find out more information. And it's just, it's brilliant. I love her. She's awesome. I want to fucking have tea with her and talk about terrible things. I love this, and I am going to seek out the movie adaptation, because I think there is like a movie adaptation. But yeah, really, really enjoyable. Really great to see Miss Marple again. She is my favorite character, as always. And yeah, I gave this 5 stars. The next book I read was for middle grade March. It was for the read a book with a silhouette on the cover, and I think it's my most disappointing book that I read this month, actually, sadly. That is The Missing Chums by F.W. Dixon. This is a Hardy Boys mystery. I probably said in my TBR, I'm not as big a fan of the Hardy Boys as I am of Nancy Drew, even though Nancy Drew, that series has its own problems. This, however, was just... Frank and Joe Hardy are a little disappointed. They are disappointed because a couple of their chums, their friends, are going off on a trip up the bay in their little motorboat, and they're going to go camping and have some fun and stuff like that. The boys are a little disappointed that they can't go along because their father, the famous detective, is heading off to on a trip to find a big-time dangerous criminal, and he needs the boys to stay with their mother while he is gone because, you know, this is the 20s or 30s, and God knows women can't stay in a house alone without the menfolk. Oh boy. They're a little disappointed, but they're plenty happy to stay with their mom because they love their mom. Up until, well, they're pretty content with this, if we're not for the fact that their friends have completely gone missing. Where did they go? Was there foul play? What has happened? So this book It does definitely have a lot of action. There's a lot of shit that happens in here. A lot of action, which I did appreciate and is something I do enjoy. There's also like a lot of guns and stuff in here, which is not something that you see in the Nancy Drew novels, and I'm guessing it's because this is marketed at boys, and they think, boys, they want to hear about right hooks and gunshots and fire and beating the shit out of people. So that's something. A lot of the action seemed a bit much to me, but it is an older book again, so that's going to exist in here. This shows its age in some really, really big ways. For example, attitudes with women, chums, and such words like swell and golly gee and all that crap. It's a bit much. It starts sounding almost like a Leave It to Beaver episode, and I just cannot deal with that saccharine, well, you hear my mouth. I don't fucking like that shit. So, chums especially is a word that I'm not 100% fond of as a phrase to use for your friends, because I don't know about you, but when I hear chum, I don't think friend. I think that scene in, like, Jaws with, like, you know what I mean. It's not great. So, yeah, I would say that overall, I don't think it really aged well. I think the plot was a bit weak. And the action scenes were a bit much. And, also there's just a lot of characters. There's just a lot of characters to keep track of. Like, these guys have a very large friend group, and they all are very 2D characters. And they're, like, constantly making fun of one of their friends who likes to eat. And it's like, really? Really? We're gonna be doing some fat shaming too, just because someone really likes to eat and you're gonna make fun of them because they like to. Like, it had to be in every single thing, just shaming people for eating. I thought this was the age when grandmothers were, like, going up to you and poking you in the side and being like, you need to eat more. Like, why? Why with the fat shaming? Why? Even with boys? Why are you doing this? It's just terrible. Anyway, my main point of this is that it did not age well. I did end up giving it 3 stars because I did like the actiony bits that were in here, and I find the pieces with their dad as the detective to be very fascinating, but the rest of it was just, yeah, it just did not age well. It just wasn't a good time. The next book I read was also for middle grade March, and it was a lot more of an enjoyable experience. And what I read was Holes by Louis Sachar, and this is for the prompt that has, like, read a book that has, like, a journey or an adventure or something in it. This was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful reread. I somehow had forgotten how much of a great story this is. It is just absolutely beautiful. There's some really powerful quotes throughout this book. And I'm forgetting to tell you what it's about. Okay, sorry. This is about Stanley Yelnats. Yes, it is his name. His family has a curse on them, put in place by his great pig stealing grandfather. Yeah. That is what they blame all of their troubles on, because nothing in his ever seems to go well for his family. Stanley was recently sentenced to go to Camp Green Lake, which is a camp for juvenile delinquents, after he was wrongfully imprisoned for stealing a pair of sneakers. It's called Camp Green Lake. Nothing is green there. There's no lake. It is in the middle of the Texas desert. What they do at this camp is they make the boys every day dig a hole. And it's supposed to be building character, but it seems like the warden who is in charge of the camp is actually looking for something. I just love this book. There, like I said, there's so many powerful quotes in here. It bounces back in time a little bit to when Camp Green Lake still had lake. Talks about like past and present and how they're connected, and fate and how that works in with everything. And it's such a good story. It also tackles some pretty serious things like the imprisonment of children, the treatment of these kids at this camp. Like it really kind of discusses that, like, yeah, they're minors, so you didn't put them in jail, but you put them in this camp and then you treat them like shit, and they're in there for any amount of crimes, whether it involved hurting people or just stealing something or just being unruly in general. They are named as dangerous members of society, and they're sent to like this camp to do manual labor to reform themselves. Is like, is that something that is really good for kids? Like, it really kind of starts a discussion on, is this the right fucking thing to do with children? Like, also talks about racism and prejudice, and it's such a good book, such a thin little book, again talking about some very, very big things, and I just really enjoyed it. This reread reminded me how much I actually love this book. I feel like I'm not making a lot of sense trying to talk to you about this book, but it's just, I had such a wonderful time revisiting this and remembering why it's such a great fucking book. There's some lines in here that I really want to read to you, but I don't want to spoil anything in case you haven't read this and you want to read it. My favorite characters were Stanley and Zero, and although I do have to say, Kissin' Kate Barlow, who is an outlaw in the past sections of this book, her energy, like the energy of her actions, I can get behind that. Like, that is, I get it, and that would be me too. Get it. Love it, not great, but it's done kind of, I can appreciate the energy. I give this 5 stars. The next book I read was for Dunder MifflinAthon, and this actually meant I completed that readathon. And this was for the Dwight prompt, which is read a book with a face on the cover. And I picked up the Mystery of Mrs Christie. My best friend and I were buddy reading this together, so we're gonna probably do a more in-depth discussion about this at some point. But anyway, this is about Agatha Christie and what happened during the 11 days where she went missing in 1926. This jumps back and forth between present day, when she is, the period in which she is missing, although it does not talk about what she is doing. It is focusing in on her husband and her daughter and what is happening surrounding the investigation of when she was missing. And then it also bounces back into time into when she first met her husband, and then progressing over their relationship and the birth of their daughter. And this is, of course, a fictionalized account. No one actually knows what the hell actually happened during those 11 days, or, you know, all of that, because she had amnesia. She just randomly showed up at a spa. So this kind of goes into the what ifs about this. I did really enjoy this. I do have to admit, I did have some problems with it. I mean, I finished this sucker in one day. Like, I just plowed through this bitch. I did find it to be overall a fascinating read. I am not 100% on board with some of the ways in which they portrayed Agatha, especially at the end, because, and of course, she's gone. I've never met her. I don't know much about her other than her wonderful books and a couple of, like, her autobiography that I've read. So I don't know her as a person, but I wasn't 100% fully on board with how she was portrayed at the end of the book. But again, it's fictionalized. I didn't know her. I don't know what she's about. I did really overall enjoy the mystery of what happened, getting into the investigation with the, like, media, with the detectives were doing all of this jazz. I really liked learning more about this, learning more about her connections with people, her family and friends and everything. I really enjoyed that. The writing itself was very superb. A couple of things I didn't like was, again, as I said, not fully on board with her portrayal at the end of the book. Not fully sold on a particular element of this book that I don't want to talk about in case you want to read it, which I would suggest you read it if you are a fan. Which brings me to my other issue with this book. If you are a fan of Agatha Christie, you better be a super fan, or at least you better have read her early books, like the ones she'd written up until 26, because if you haven't read them, you are going to get spoiled for some plot points of them that are mentioned in here. I was kind of really upset, and I really kind of am still bothered, because I had pretty much the conclusion of the murder of Roger Ackroyd spoiled for me because I was reading this and it was mentioned, oh, the solution to blah blah blah, and then it was in there, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's literally on my TBR for this year, because I found it at a secondhand shop last year, and I was excited because, oh, I haven't read this one. Yeah, I don't know if I can read it this year, or if I have to now put it aside for a couple of years until I forget, hopefully, this particular plot point that was mentioned in here, so I can read and be shocked instead of just having had it spoiled for me. So that I'm kind of upset about. Kind of chaps my ass a little bit. So if you want to read this book, I would say make sure you've read all of her books and things that she's published up until 1926, because you're gonna get spoiled for something otherwise. Like I said, I finished this in a day. I couldn't put it down. I needed to know what was gonna happen. So it was enjoyable. The writing is pretty good. I probably will check out this author's other books. She's written some other things about other people in history. For example, she wrote about Albert Einstein's wife. She wrote about Hedy Lamarr, who is a fascinating person in time. She wrote about Winston Churchill's wife and stuff like that. So she has some other things that she's written about. So I do plan on reading her writing, her other books. I'm just a little annoyed I got spoiled a little bit. I do have to say that I know it's a fictionalized account of these real life people, but I had heard some things about Agatha Christie's first husband Archie before, and I can tell you, I would punch that guy right in the dick. Just walk right up to him and crush his tomatoes. Just throwing that out there. He is terrible. Overall, I did still give it 4 stars. Just still a little mad about the being spoiled. And the last book that I read in March was also a reread, and it was for middle grade March, which means, yes, I did not actually complete middle grade March because I still had one more middle grade book to read. Sad. But I gave it a good college try. Last book I read was for the read a book with like a fantastical setting or like fantastical like elements to it, and I picked up Inkheart by Ramona Quimby. This is all about Maggie. Maggie's mother has been gone since she was very small. She's been raised by her single father, who is a bookbinder. Maggie's father has never read aloud to her. And she finds out one particular evening that the reason he's never read aloud to her is because Mo has the ability to read characters and things out of books. And some of the people he has read out of the books are not so great. This, of course, deals with the shenanigans from that, and centers around a book called Inkheart. So overall, this was a pretty good reread. I did really enjoy getting sucked into this world again. It's very easy to do. I do have to admit, though, having read other middle grade fantasies over the past year or so, and really enjoying them. Revisiting this has made me notice more of its flaws, I guess, flaws within characters, flaws within the bad guy purely being just a bad guy, just straight up, like there's no real depth to him at all, except for the fact that he is a psychopath. I really enjoyed the reread. I really enjoyed getting sucked into this world again. I love the fantastical elements of it, the very strange happenings and everything, and learning more about the characters, but I did notice more of the flaws, is what I'm saying, than I had on my previous readings of this series. I absolutely love Fangolio, the writer. He is probably my favorite character. I did also really enjoy the other characters as well. Dustfinger and Fareed. I do like the main characters like Mo and Maggie and Maggie's Aunt Eleanor. I did really enjoy them as well, although I definitely have some big problems with all three of them. Namely, Maggie just doing things before she really thinks them through all the way through. That is something that I have a real big problem with when main characters do shit like that. It's like, slow your roll a second. Also, you and your dad are like uncomfortably close. Like, it's almost weird. So, just calm down a little bit. Overall though, I did really enjoy the rereading of this book. It has me hyped up to read the second book this month, Inkspell, and I hope that will leave me hyped up so I can read like Ink Death in May and finally finish reading this damn series. But yeah, still a really good time, still really enjoyable, still really love and am also terrified of the idea of reading characters out of books. That's just, but yeah, enjoyed the journey. I gave this, what did I give it? I gave it 5 stars. And that is it. That is it for the books that I read in March. Well, I did have like one disappointing read. The rest of the time was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed revisiting some of these books. I really enjoyed reading the couple that were new to me. And yeah, overall I had a pretty solid reading month, and it got me really hyped up to read some really good books this month. So I hope that you all also had a wonderful reading month, and I hope that you are enjoying April so far, and I will see you in the next video, guys. Bye.